This is Shadow Me Next with Roberts Essex. Mr. Essex, thank you so much for joining us on Shadow Me Next today. As we mentioned in your bio, you have this incredible memoir called Chance Beginnings that you have written for everyone to enjoy. Why is storytelling, especially in the medical field, why is storytelling so important?
It helps people to get a different aspect of life, sometimes to have the ability to see someone else in a different light. It helps you make decisions that you might not be able to do on your own. In my case, this is a story about a young man that needs to be told, about faith, about how he gets into medicine, which is a calling, apparently, and has worked well for him. But during the process, he went through not only lots of turbulent times, but a great deal of tragedy that he had to overcome.
Absolutely. It's an incredible story. And you mentioned medicine as a calling. Mr. Essex, can you describe to some of our pre-health students who think, well, I'm just looking at it as a job, or I'm just looking at it, to pay the bills. Describe to them what medicine as a calling really means.
Sometimes we don't make our own choices. Sometimes things are destined. Sometimes we have to give in to what God has still made for us to do. And in this case, both myself and the character had that same calling. Sometimes it's far beyond and far outside of what we think we're going to do. But like I said, God has ways of bringing people around to doing things that he wants us to do. Now, when that happens, that calling means that you have something inside of you that he wants to share with other people. He wants you to share what other people are feeling. In my case, and in Chance's case, it's the compassion and it's the desire to help and to learn internally and teach.
That's beautiful. It's so interesting because you have worked as a PA for a number of years, over 2 decades, probably approaching on 3 decades now.
That's right.
And being able to create this character Chance and describe his story, which parallels your story, the reflective nature of that, I assume, was very eye-opening for you. Did you learn anything about your life specifically in medicine that you maybe did not realize while you were writing Chance Beginnings?
Yeah, this reflection has been cathartic because there were some things that bothered me about my life's journey that I felt like needed to be shared about his life's journey. But overall, I guess what makes you do this long term and stay with this is the satisfaction of accomplishment to bring other people's health back in line and learn how to deal with their medical problems that maybe they didn't take another look at, another way to look at things. I see a lot of patients that are not getting that actual time that as PAs we can devote that our physician colleagues may not be able to because they have to see so many more patients nowadays to make the same money they did before. We can still afford to take that time. Even in an emergency setting, we still get requests to see the APP because we sit down with the patient. A long time ago, I learned from a physician colleague, you haven't seen the patient or you haven't done anything with the patient until you've made physical contact. So every patient, you got to touch every patient, even to put your hand on their shoulder for a few moments or their knee or whatever. You made a physical connection.
I'm really glad you mentioned that. I was thinking about the other day. I was thinking about that in terms of COVID, which were you practicing clinically during COVID?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So you remember we didn't touch anybody. I mean, we didn't in our office. And
right.
I remember thinking how entirely disconnected I felt from our patients. At least we did. We touched our patients, but there was no touch that wasn't medically necessary, right? So, if you needed to feel their lymph nodes, you felt their lymph nodes, but shaking their hand, giving them a hug, placing your hand on their knee, we didn't do that. And the disconnection that I think we all felt was immense. And I feel like we practice better medicine when we make that one-on-one connection. Mr. Essex, you mentioned the fact that your history was not always desirable and you had challenges and struggles leading up to your career in medicine. And then perhaps in your career in medicine, there were different struggles. But what would you tell the person listening who might be thinking, this field of medicine is not for me. I have been through, too much that has really ruined this field for me. I can't admit with other people because of the trauma of my past, et cetera. What would you tell that person?
There comes a time when it is time to walk away, but usually that's just related to the amount of time you've put into it. If that feeling is there because of what we went through during COVID, I can certainly understand that. I never want to have to participate in something like that again. It was incredibly traumatic to all of us. But you have to, again, for me, as displayed in the character, this is a walk of faith. And my faith tells me to continue on until I have reached that challenge that I'm supposed to meet. If you know what I'm talking about, or if our listeners know what I'm talking about, those of us who have a calling continue until we have reached the challenge that he has for us. In other words, there's a patient there someplace I haven't touched yet. When I've reached that goal, it'll be time for me to say, that's it. But so if you're feeling like you're frustrated with the profession, just reflect inwardly. Have I touched that one person yet? If you don't feel like you have, if you don't feel that warmth inside, that you're satisfied with, you've reached your objectives, just continue on if you can. One day at a time, one patient at a time. If it becomes unbearable, it's okay, walk away. But better for you to walk away than to get so caught up in the ill emotion of it if you're feeling that something happens untoward. But just continue to reflect inwardly, and it'll tell you. You'll be your guide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pray about it.
The purpose is what's so important, I think, like you mentioned, knowing your why, keeping that at the center of all things makes those hard days a bit easier and keeps you motivated, I think, to facing the next day.
It's a purpose-driven profession. Absolutely. It has to be.
Thank goodness for that. You're right. It does have to be because of the nature of the profession, right? I mean, what we're dealing with, it's human emotions, and all of that complicated by a physical illness, right?
If you're thinking about doing this for the money, forget it. It's got to be a calling. You've got to have you have got to have a drive that you want to change someone's life, either by helping them to learn how to take care of themselves better, or in lots of cases that I find in emergency medicine, it's asking the right questions, because history is everything in medicine. So you need to know how to be a little bit of a detective when you're practicing medicine. These are all things, these are talents that you get to have. And so if you don't have that, if you're just thinking about this because you didn't decide not to go into architecture, or you don't want to do underwater basket weaving or whatever, medicine seemed like the thing to do at the time, you're not the right candidate for that. This is something that starts early.
This is a fantastic segue into something that I'm very interested in hearing about. So let's think way back when you're in Jacksonville and you met your first PA. This was probably in the beginning, really, of the profession, or at least it was rather new. PAs have not been around as long as nurses or physicians. When you've met your first PA, what about that person made you say, this field of medicine, this is for me?
Well, I understand that I went from paramedics in private life into the military. In Jacksonville, at that time, I'm a Navy corpsman who has been in the military for about 3 years. I'm at a master jet field, Cecil Field, which is the second largest runway in the country. It's the alternate runway for the space shuttle. 2 PAs in my clinic have been in the military for over 20 years. They're both warrant officers, and one of them specializes in dermatology and gynecology, and the other one specializes in internal medicine. And all of the young flight surgeons are going to either one of these PAs for their expertise and to help them with clinical matters that come up. And these are physicians who are commanders and lieutenant commanders in the Navy. And I was sorely impressed by that. When I got out of the military, I could not recoup the paramedic information without starting all over again. And so I said, okay, it's time to go back to college and follow that goal. These guys were so impressive, and that was absolute incentive. And the Lord gave me enough information that was part of his plan, that was successful. To get into the PA profession like I did in rural medicine in Georgia, there were only a couple of opportunities. In the Medical College of Georgia, there were 32 seats, and We had 4 seats available through an allied health education program in the state. I don't know how, only by the grace of God was I able to go back to college and be successful with that and get accepted on the first time up into the program for 4 seats. Otherwise, we were all competing with over 3,500 applicants for 32 seats. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's what I say. This is destiny for me. And I've tried to live it out every day.
It's amazing. And I mean, almost 3 decades later, the statistics are even more daunting. And, to the person listening, it's possible, obviously. I mean, even the odds then were challenging and the odds now are still challenging, but my goodness, is it worth it? And you've worked in, so the specialties you've worked in, as a PA, internal medicine, hospital medicine, emergency medicine, you've been doing this for decades. How have you seen medicine progress? And this might be a little bit of a teaser for some of the more challenging subjects that we're going to talk about in a second. Say perhaps it has not progressed always positively, but what are some things that you could remark on that you've seen change in medicine over the last number of years?
Very early on, we were sometimes regarded as little more than medical assistants. A lot of scut work. I mean, here, go out and follow my orders, or just scribing what the physician wanted you to put in the record. That's evolved greatly over the years. I remember my first emergency in rural health. I went from Arizona, where I was in a level 3 trauma center, to an environment where there were 4 beds in my emergency room in the middle of nowhere, and 4 doctors that were on standby, and most of the time they were playing golf someplace. When you would transfer a patient, the doctor on the other end wanted to talk to the attending who was 80 miles away. That was a great challenge because many times those transfers, although they had to follow through due to EMTALA, the law that says you have to accept a patient, our listeners might not know that, there was a great deal of pushback. That is not the case anymore. You're holding down positions now in facilities where young physicians just don't want to practice. It's a money issue. Yet at the same time, further challenges that we still have existing with us is a pushback from pharmacists to help us be able to write certain drugs that patients need, even on a short-term basis, and a pushback by certain medical associations around the country that see us as competing now. We're not competing with our physician colleagues. We are their right hand. So as I've seen this thing evolve greatly in hospital medicine, sometimes we are the first line for our physicians. Sometimes we have 12 doctors that are covering patients throughout large medical facilities like the medical center in Macon, and the PA is taking all of the intake and writing orders on patients every day. PA may have 30 patients. The physicians may have 12 apiece. That's a huge difference from 30 years ago. So in every one of these cases, there's been a great evolution of the profession. We still have ways to go. I think we've just seen something happen, though, in the last couple of years that's going to cause us some issues, and that is the change in the name, professional change in the name, which I think was going to get a lot of pushback. But we can all work on it together. New, young PAs in the profession or nurse practitioners in their profession need to get involved in the politics of the profession to help advance further the efforts that you and I have started.
I'm really glad you mentioned politics. Actually, I'm not glad you mentioned politics. You're absolutely correct about our involvement in politics, and even the students coming up behind us. Tell me, so you worked in politics for a number of years at both state and national level. Number one, what does a PA's role in politics even look like? And then 2, why? Why does it matter? Why do we need to be involved?
Well, of course, you have to have something you're particularly interested in changing. And then that motivation then moves you to get involved on a state or national level in a particular board or committee of one of those organizations that is working on a project that you have in mind. For instance, if you want to get involved in being able to write opioids on a limited basis for patients who are seen in rural or critical access hospitals, you need to get involved with a legislative and governmental affairs committee to make that happen. And to do so, most of the time, all you have to do is express interest. And if there's an opening and you qualify and you've never had any issues with anything else, you're going to get appointed to that committee. Once you get into committees like that and you find that that's another calling for you, and you are good at it, and you help provide information and write legislation that is moved on up the line, you'll see that perhaps your additional goal should be to further your involvement in that chapter and move for something that can lead the chapter into better developmental affairs for the profession in your state. That's how you get involved in that. Whether or not you stay involved in it or not depends on how much you enjoy that, because there's some problems that come along with that. It takes time. It takes time out of your practice. Again, you have to be personally motivated for that sort of thing. I've been involved with many opportunities to change many facets in emergency medicine, what we do, types of tests that we take, how we test each other, privileges for hospital medicine PAs, and how we're interacting with physicians and specialists in internal medicine. So once you start, it kind of opens up a doorway to continuing that path if you'd like, or you can just do it a single time. Like you say, there have been many issues that I've been involved with, but that's my OCD. That's my OCD. That's right. And when you get opinionated, though, it's kind of hard because we all take this very seriously when we're working in those type of environments, and we watch politics on TV in general, and that can be a very enjoyable thing and very frustrating.
Exactly. And that's, I think that's why not we all, I can't loop everybody into that, but I think that's why for some of us who politics just seems like, a very steep hill to climb, or even perhaps a sour experience. I like the way you described, if you feel like you need to go into politics, it's because of something you're particularly interested in changing.
That's
right.
And
I never quite thought of it that way. I always thought that people in politics just went in to be warriors for healthcare, and they are, but a lot of them do have a specific battle that they're fighting, that they're trying to win. You mentioned something, Mr. Essex, that I don't want to let slip away, and that is the fact that when you are doing these extracurriculars, perhaps we'll call them, for example, your role in politics, it does take away from your practice. And as PAs, that's really what we are meant to do. And what we want to do is treat patients and heal patients and work with patients and walk with them on their journeys to good healthcare. This will lead into the next question. And that is, you have done beyond politics, you have been involved in a number of different things, just to name a few. A steering committee for the CDC. You served as a test item writer for the National Board of Medicine, multiple publications. You've served on boards with a number of different societies. And this will be a two-part question, but how do you balance the desire to really get involved with a lot of these things with perhaps losing a little bit of that direct patient care, that one-on-one time with patients?
I have no idea. Yeah, I heard back from my publicist the other day. Said, I have no idea how you do this at 68, how you balance all of this. I don't know, frankly, but it is a drive. It's a continued drive. So when I was doing the publications, I was doing case presentations from patients that I had done. And as I did each one of those, it was a continued learning experience for me. So the next time I came across anything that was in that presentation, I was able to utilize that for additional patient care or additional improvement of patient care. So it's as I make time for these kind of things, I work a schedule of 10 to 14, 12-hour shifts, sometimes 24-hour shifts in critical access hospitals, where we may see 14 to 20 patients in that period. But there's time to devote to something maybe I'm working on the internet, or something I need to make a note of to do when I'm off. During the off days, I have a place in my home where I devote to whatever work I'm doing. This is a small list of things that I have done. Right now, I'm multitasking on about 8 different projects at the same time. As we speak, I have a couple still
My
turning.
goodness.
I have 2 other books that I want to write about the COVID issue. I have picture coffee table books I want to put together. I'm still writing case presentations. I do legal. I saw that you do. I do medical legal work. I have 2 attorneys firms that I work with on cases. That's a little sticky wicket, you don't want to work against a colleague, but At the same time, there's sometimes we all make mistakes, and there's sometimes something else may have been on our mind. We should have been devoting to a patient, and things happen. So I don't know. The answer to that question overall is exactly as I started. I have no idea. But that little angel sitting on my shoulder that tells us clinically, you need to get this test, you need to do this for that patient, is the same one that sits on my shoulder and says, hey, maybe you need to take this approach to this, maybe you need to do this, or take time for that. It's a life well lived, enjoyable. I do see my wife occasionally. We pass in the hall sometimes, but we've been together 35 years now. So she's she's my business person.
Mr. Essex, before we wrap up here, you have mentioned a couple of subjects in medicine that might be viewed as controversial, perhaps a little sticky, but definitely, in my opinion, discussion-worthy questions, right? These are things that for the person listening, if you have an upcoming interview in medicine, if you're going to be, interrogated by any branch of any field in medicine, you might actually hear about some of these. And I'd like to bring back a couple that you have mentioned. One is the name change from physician assistant to physician associate. And for clarification, when we're recording this conversation right now, it's the end of 2025. So this is not a new idea. This has been a decades-long journey. I mean, you've probably experienced
Absolutely.
a couple of considerations of name changes, but it's just resurfaced recently. And I would love to hear, especially as a veteran in this profession, I would love to hear your take on that, changing our name as PAs.
Well, first of all, we all know, and most of the physicians we work with know we're not anyone's assistant. And the name physician assistant is not a possessive noun.
Right.
It's not physician's assistant. The doctor that founded this profession just could not come up with another title that he felt was more appropriate at the time than physician assistant. Because he couldn't find a way to appropriately place us into that black and white descriptive process, but he knew he had to take all of these well-qualified field surgical veterans and do something with them for the underserved and rural patients throughout the country. That's where we started. And so physician assistant was a misnomer, but it was a title that worked. And it's worked for us now for about 80 years. My problem with change of name is a change of name as it applies to anything that has governmental funding or governmental legislation. When you've been through 70 to 80 years of legislation to make sure that a profession continues to advance, you don't suddenly decide what color the hood of the car is just because you don't like the shade. So we have not seen the pushback that's coming yet from the AMA, and I'm sure the American College of Surgeons and the American Board of Emergency Medicine and others. It's coming. It's coming because that move may be signaling to our physician colleagues that we're seeking to become an independent provider. And what has brought us so far is the fact we've been a dependent colleague to these physicians. That's a politics from the physicians' end, and it is very strong. We have no numbers compared. So we need young blood. We need motivated blood that'll help foster or continue to promote that relationship. In Georgia, for instance, many years ago, we started off with the ability to write prescriptions based on our physician's license number. The pushback from the pharmacy board was you can't use your physician's number for that. For a while, we were delayed in our ability to write prescriptions until we realized we need to make sure these guys understand we're there as a helping hand and not as a adversary. When that happened, doors opened for us. So we need fresh take on this. Now, what is concerning to me is the new generation of students and the new generation of potential PAs seem to be a little less patient. And part of the reason for the change in the name for them was they didn't want to be thought of in any essence as being an assistant to anyone. And they do want to make a drive towards independence. Gotta stop that and just be happy with what you are. You knew what the profession's name was when you got into it. Leave it alone. It's like,
Love that.
I don't want to be called an optician anymore. I want to be called an eyeglass maker. Stop it. Remember, patient care is what you get into this for, and it doesn't matter what your name is. Be recognized by what you can do. No, I don't care what they call me. Nobody calls me assistant. What do they call you? You got a white coat on. Everybody's called doc because you take care of them. That is someone it's a term of endearment.
It is.
By our patients that they place on someone they trust with their care and who has made them feel better in some way. Enjoy that. That's what, if you don't want to do this for that, you're not meant for this.
Oh my goodness. And I think that is one of the reasons why I am so grateful for you and the other healthcare professionals joining me on this podcast, is so that students do see it is not just a title. And physician assistant, physician associate, PA, etc., nurse practitioner, at the end of the day, it is, what do you want to do? How do you want to treat patients? And what do you want your lifestyle to look like? Right. And that's why I am so grateful for you all sharing your stories, explaining some of the challenges that you've seen, the struggles, so that students can put themselves in these roles and say, is this going to suit me? Is this what I'm being called to do? And ideally, they can step into their role in medicine with just a little bit more confidence in their decision. So I'm so grateful for you, Mr. Essex. Thank you so much for joining us today on Shadow Me Next. Guys, please check out his book, Chance Beginnings. It is available on Amazon, and the link is in the show notes below.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.